We are here for you on radio, television and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking now. And you might have seen in Parliament today, the anti-strike laws, or so they're being called. Where do you stand on it? Do you support the government in their quest to basically make it harder to effectively go on strike? Or are you with the unions, perhaps the Labour Party, in thinking it's all a step too far? What are your thoughts on that? And social care. We go around these houses, don't we, all the time. So I'm pondering tonight, do you think any politicians honestly are taking social care seriously? Do you ever feel that we'll be in a situation where we'll have an effective, affordable solution that works well in this country or not? I'm not sure, if I'm totally honest. And a conversation that's got many people talking for years, quite frankly, is the question of what should the minimum criminal age be in this country? England, Wales and Northern Ireland, it's 10. In Scotland, it's 12. I've got to say 10 is really very young compared to, well, most other countries, quite frankly. Is it suitable or do we need to be raising it? I want your thoughts on that. And last but not least, I'm wondering tonight, how much do you think you need to earn in order to be comfortable? Give me your thoughts on all of that. But before we get into it, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story today. The RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch has called the government's new anti-strike bill an attack on human rights. The legislation would require levels of service from ambulance staff, firefighters and railway workers during industrial action. It comes amid a wave of strikes across the public sector in disputes over pay. The Business Secretary Grant Shapps says the legislation is necessary to protect the public.
To deny and to vote against legislation that brings in minimum safety levels to help our constituents is to attack their security and their welfare.
But the Labour Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, says the system was failing before the strikes began.
Is my constituent Spina, who waited over an hour for an ambulance, who died waiting for an ambulance, and that was not on a strike day. That is because of the disastrous chaos we have in the system under this Conservative government.
Well, ambulance workers in England and in Wales are set to go on strike tomorrow after talks with the government over pay failed to reach a resolution. It's the first industrial action within the health sector this year, with nurses in England also set to walk out later this month. The Health Secretary has described the action as unhelpful, but insisted he is working with trade unions. Steve Barclay also saying the government isn't looking to backdate a pay increase for NHS workers.
We don't think it would be appropriate to go back to last April, to retrospectively go back all those months in terms of what has already happened this year. We had a process that looked at the issues in the round, but at the same time we want to listen to the trade unions, we want to engage with them constructively, we want to get the right evidence into the pay review body next year, and of course they made further representations in terms of this year, notwithstanding that we're more than 3/4 of the way through the year, and it is right that we listen to those concerns.
More strike action now, this time in Scotland, where teachers across the country are on the first day of their 2-day strike after failing to reach an agreement over pay with the Scottish Government. The current offer would see most staff in classrooms receive a 5% pay rise, but unions want 10%. Primary school teachers walked out today. Staff at secondary schools will walk out tomorrow. And Labour has promised that if it gets into power, a package of welfare reforms under their leadership will help people return to work. Under the plan, claimants will try paid work, and if it doesn't work out, within a year they can go back on benefits. The Labour Party also plans a further reform of employment support for the over 50s. Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth claims the reforms will help disabled people or those on sickness benefits find work.
What I'm proposing today are new measures, new reforms, new thinking to support people who say they want to return to work. Now, in this country, we've got 1 million people looking for work who want a job, and we've got hundreds of thousands of people who are currently designated as long-term sick, but say they would want to work if given the right support.
And it's flying off the shelves. Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, has become the fastest-selling non-fiction book ever, with 400,000 copies sold on launch day. His version of some events, though, has been thrown into doubt. In the book, the Duke of Sussex writes, for example, he heard about the death of his great-grandmother, the Queen Mother, in a phone call whilst he was at Eton. She died in March 2002, but GB News has uncovered photographic evidence which shows the prince returning from a skiing trip to Switzerland with his father and his brother at the same time. Representatives of the Duke have been contacted for comment, but so far have declined to do so. Amazon says it plans to shut down 3 UK warehouses, which could impact more than 1,000 jobs. The company launched consultations at sites in Hemel Hempstead, Doncaster and Gurrock. It's understood workers will be offered roles at other Amazon locations. The company's also revealed plans for 2 major centres in the West Midlands and the North East, which will create 2,500 jobs over the next 3 years. And lastly, to the United States, where a teacher has been hailed a hero after getting pupils out of a classroom after she was shot by a 6-year-old boy. 25-year-old Abigail Zwerner was shot by one of her pupils at Richneck Elementary School in Virginia last week. Police say the boy fired 1 shot, which hit her hand and her chest, but she still managed to get the kids out of the classroom. She's in hospital now in a stable condition. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. That last story, 6-year-olds with a gun. I mean, what is this world coming to? It leads me, by the way, kind of nicely to one of the things I want to discuss with you tonight, which is the age of criminal responsibility. What do you think it should be in this country? I'm fascinated to hear your thoughts on that. England, Wales and Northern Ireland currently is 10. Scotland is 12. I want your thoughts on that and much more tonight. If you just join me, I am Michelle Dewbs. This is Dewbs & Co, and I am with you till 7 o'clock tonight. And alongside me, I've got the political consultant, Emma Burnell, and the political commentator, Benedict Spence. Good evening, both of you. Welcome. You know the drill as well, don't you? It's not just about us three. It's about you at home as well. What is on your mind tonight? gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email, or you can tweet me at gbnews. I want to talk about anti-strike laws, as they're being called. Do you support them or not? Social care. Do you actually think that anyone is really serious about sorting that out in this country? Because it feels like, every 5 minutes there's a different white paper, a different commission, a different consultation, a different pie-eyed strategy. And we always end up in this position, don't we, where it isn't really working. Do you think anyone will ever get to grips with it and sort it out? And what would that look like to you? And also, what do you think you would need to earn to live, I quote, a comfortable life in your area? People have been asked that very question, and I find the answers quite fascinating. So tonight, tell me, to live comfortably, and you can tell me what you think is comfortable if you want, how much do you reckon you need, and what is your area? Because I reckon there'll be a bit of a discrepancy, shall we say, particularly around places like London, perhaps the north. When it comes to the criminal age of responsibility, lots of you are getting in touch. You're giving me a sentiment that I massively echo as well. 2 words, Jamie Bulger. I would say that to anyone that thinks that the age needs to be risen, but that's a debate I want to have tonight. Lots of you as well getting in touch about the strike bill going through Parliament. I think that is splitting opinion from what I can see so far. As per usual, my outfit, you always make me laugh. One of these days, I'm going to create some kind of online fashion blog. You guys can be the bloggers, because it doesn't matter what I wear. You guys come out with your comments. Phil thinks I look like Professor Plum from Cluedo. He thought that was who he was watching tonight. Peter says I look queenly. I appreciate that. And Matthew says that you look like Violet from Charlotte and the Chocolate Factory. Isn't that the one that swallowed everything and was huge and then exploded? Is it?
She became a plum.
She became a plum. Oh, wow.
They had to roll her out.
Yeah.
Did they? They had to roll her out? Well.
And then squeeze the juice out of her.
Oh, you don't want to squeeze my juice out. Anyway, it's tea time. Let's move on. Grant Shapps has introduced a bill to Parliament this afternoon. It's been called an anti-strike bill by many. It's basically about minimum levels of safety during a strike and what that would look like. Let's have a listen to him earlier on, shall we?
Whilst we absolutely believe in the right to strike, we're duty-bound. We're duty-bound to protect the lives and the livelihoods of the British people. The British people need to know that when they have a heart attack, a stroke or a serious injury, that an ambulance will turn up. And that if they need hospital care, they have access to it.
So just to be clear, by the way, some of this kind of minimum service level was in the Tory manifesto in 2019. I think it was transport, yes, it applied to then. And now they're wanting basically to broaden it out into different sectors. Emma Burnell, are you in favour of this or not?
Minimum service levels? Absolutely. You first, Rishi Sunak. Let's see you deliver minimum service levels on the day there aren't a strike. Let's see us not having 8-hour waits for an ambulance when there aren't a strike. Let's see us not having the North basically never getting a decent train service when there isn't a strike. If you want to sort this out, A, you can't threaten to sack nurses for going on strike because, frankly, we desperately need all the nurses we have. And the same is true of paramedics. And actually, despite what you may hear from other people, it's also true of the people who work on the railways, not just the people who own them. So actually, we do need to have minimum service levels, but we need to get them sorted out first. And one way of doing that is to have a workforce that feels happy and confident in their work.
To come back at you, Grant Shapps, to quote him word for word, he says the following: nobody is talking about sacking nurses. Nothing we're announcing today in this bill from the dispatch box is about getting rid of nurses any more than any employment contract has to be followed.
So it is about sacking people if they don't follow their changed employment contracts. So it is about that. It's just nonsense. He's talking nonsense.
So I think it's a no from you. You don't support it, Benedict.
I'm not sure. I don't think you made that clear enough.
Yeah. A fence is a comfortable place, Emma, isn't it?
I tell you what, I don't think key service workers should ever strike. But I also don't think, as Emma says, a government should put them in a position where they feel they need to strike. I'm torn as to whether or not we should put it into law, whether or not they ever do strike, because I think that erodes an element of trust between key workers and government and public. If you're saying, you're not going to strike and, there are going to be bad consequences for you, rather than saying, we understand that when you take up this job, you volunteer yourself to say, I'm not going to do that. And that's a large part of the issue that I have with many areas of this country is the erosion of trust. And I think, actually, when you get a government that says, quite rightly, actually, that, key services should mean that, they should be key, but then says, and we're going to back this up by strong-arming you a little bit, then I don't think that sits too well with a lot of people, frankly. And so, part of me, the slightly more liberal in me sort of sits there going, does this need to be a law? Could this not be solved actually by you following through on other manifesto pledges to make sure that key services actually work properly? I do think that there's an element of passing the buck slightly. And, I'd love to sit here and bash the unions for being over-politicised and this, that and the other, but actually, when you're looking broadly at so many areas of the country not working, and you think, where does the buck stop? Oh, it stops with the minister. That's where it stops with. It doesn't stop with the union bosses.
The police and prison officers, let's not forget, they can't strike, that they're not allowed to do that. Do you think the unions are overly political? Do you think any of this is the kind of organised, coordinated strikes, etc.? Do you think it has become political?
No, I don't. I mean, it is a political issue in that all things kind of boil down to a political issue. We're talking about people who are employed by the state, so that is even more a political issue because ultimately their boss is Steve Barclay in the health sector and ultimately Rishi Sunak. So yes, that is a political thing. But we are talking about the right to work and the right to decent work and the right to decent work at pay. And the reason that we have a Labour Party, and it's called Labour, is because this was set up to fight for those rights. So this has always been when we say, is this overly political, the rights of workers has always been a political thing under our political system, under our modern political system. How we do or don't treat workers and the relationship between capital and labour has always been political. So I don't think it's any more or less political than it has ever been.
So do you think, for example, if the unions were negotiating with a Labour government, do you think they would be as as rigid in their demands, requirements, requests and all the rest? Or do you think they'd be more flexible with Labour? Do you think there's any element of this that is the unions trying to break the Tory government?
Why would the unions want to break the Tory government? Because they don't feel the Tory government is the best negotiating partner for them. That might be the better question, but I think actually the truth is the unions probably have a bigger hold over Labour, a better ability to have a negotiation and get a negotiated position with Labour because Labour are sympathetic to their cause.
I also think, though, it's worth noting that, if we're talking about it being politicised, right now the Labour Party doesn't need the unions to sort of act on their behalf. The Tories have managed to lose a staggering lead and turn it into a staggering deficit all by themselves before all of this started crumbling, before the strike started happening. So I think any idea that this is purely about politics, no, I think actually it's come to a point where, we've talked for years about the NHS is on its last legs, it's crumbling, this, that and the other. I think finally we've got to the stage where it has broken, it is not working. Is the response to that, the sensible discussion is the response to that to just throw more money at it? Does it need reform? And I think part of the problem with this is the Tory government isn't prepared really to have that very difficult conversation. They only have 2 years left. The feeling is that they're going to lose in 2 years. You might as well be bold at this point and say, right, well, let's actually try and sort this out because we might as well do something useful, rather than sit there wringing their hands and go, oh, it's all playing politics. That doesn't serve anyone.
And do you think it's right that the police, for example, as I mentioned, prison officers, they can't strike?
No, I think everybody should have the right to withdraw their labour, frankly.
Do you?
It's a fundamental human right. You have the right to say, I wish to withdraw my labour, and that's just a basic human right. I think it's quite poor that we don't allow that. And I think it's quite obvious.
But what do you think?
If you look at the army and the terrible conditions that a lot of army housing is in, the low pay in the army, why is that? Well, one part of that is that they're not allowed to go on strike.
But then
you're asking them to step in for every blooming service that we have going.
Well, no, actually, I think if you bring in, for example, the army, and yes, I know you all get in touch with me and say, Michelle, it's much broader than just the army, but I think actually when you do put...
Tom that approach to politics. What's the answer to every question? It's the army.
It's the armed forces. Yeah, well, actually, that's because they do such a good job, actually. And when you do get them running some of these things, like we've just seen with Border Force going on strike in some of the airports, by the way, they do a great job. But do
It's
you
a good
think...
thing that they do a good job on these things, because the one thing that they wouldn't do a good job is the one thing they're not equipped to do, which is fight a war right now, because their equipment is in such bad nick.
True. And do you think, you're saying everyone's got the right to withdraw their labour, etc. And I guess what you mean by that is everyone can withdraw their labour while still holding on to their job. But do you think that there's any situation where public good, public health, public safety actually, as a collective, trumps the individual's, to quote you, right to withdraw their labour?
I think that it's a really, really complex decision to withdraw labour. I think it should be balloted. I think that is where you have to have a union structure rather than individual decisions to withdraw labour. It has to be a collective decision that comes down to a bargaining position between the union and the employer.
Well, there you go. Give me your thoughts on that. My simple question to you is, do you support these so-called anti-strike laws, these minimum service levels, expanding them beyond the different sectors? Give me your thoughts. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Don't forget as well to tell me criminal age, minimum criminal age, what do you think it should be, and how much do you think you need to have to be comfortable in your area? But coming up next, I want to talk to you about social care. Are any political party, any politicians really serious about getting to grips with this issue? You tell me.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. Clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock this evening, alongside with the political consultant, Emma Burnell, and the political commentator, Benedict Spence. Two politicos. We're quite politically heavy tonight, aren't we? I've been asking you guys, where do you stand on the so-called anti-strike laws? Jim says, why don't we ban picket lines? You pose an interesting question. You say, what is the purpose of them? Other than, in your mind, to intimidate people into not crossing them. Interesting. I suspect people will have a view on that. Jim, let's have a look what else you guys are saying. JW, you're saying you don't support any strikes, but the right to strike basically should be sacrosanct. Once you start putting limits on it, slippery slope towards banning strikes altogether, you say. I would say you're kind of split on this one tonight. Steve says the government is correct. We're being blackmailed by public sector workers and we need minimum cover in essential services. Don't forget, by the way, it's not just public sector workers that are striking. Mark says it should be written in your contract that you can't strike. But a different Mark says, well, what's the point of a contract then? Why not say you don't strike and then your union negotiate a deal for you whilst you're still out working. Mike says, do your guests seriously think that Labour is for the people? And David, the unions going on strike are meant to work for the public who pay their wages. Julia, any public sector worker should not be able to strike. If the anti-strike bill helps towards this happening eventually, she says she's moderately happy with that. Oh, and then you add something on the end and you say you think public sector workers are already looked after adequately. Oh, I bet people will respond to that and have strong opinions. I suggest that some might disagree with you. Keep your thoughts coming in. GBviews at gbnews.uk is my email address. And you can tweet me as well if that's your thing, at Michelle Dewbs. Now, let's talk, shall we? Social care, because that's what all people do, really, don't they? They talk about it. We have plans, commissions, white papers, reviews, you name it, proposals. Nothing really ever, though, seems to get done, does it? I'm going to come straight to you on this one, because we can sit and we can list all the different you can wallpaper your entire apartment complex with your white papers. There's been that many of them. Nothing really ever moves on. Do you think, my question is tonight, that any politicians really are serious about fixing social care?
I mean, we can only work out whether or not the Labour Party is, if they get in power and they actually act on that. I think it's a little unfair to sit here and go, well, of course the Labour Party isn't. You can only work that out once they get into power.
No, that's not true. Because
I think that is true.
No, because they could have fixed it previously when they were in power.
Well, we weren't talking about it so much back then, were we? It wasn't such a pressing issue. And now this, I mean, although I would actually say that that is perhaps part of the reason why we find ourselves in the issues that we currently are, and that is that politics for far too long in this country, on both sides, has been too reactive. It has not been about proactivity. And, you know, we're talking about listing all the different papers and discussions about social care. I could list all the different issues that governments across the sector have, you know, taken issues and kicked the can down the road, from the NHS to energy. You name it, that's what we do in this country very badly. So do we actually take it seriously? I would argue no, because actually we like to talk, as you point out, lots and lots we like to hear from everybody's different opinion. We take a lot of time, we spend a lot of money on finding the facts, and then when we have the facts, which are often competing sets of facts, we do very little, because we have competing lists of special interests who are not prepared to bow or bend or negotiate on certain things. And I think the thing that it always comes back to for me is housing and planning and building. Actually, one of the major issues with social care is capacity. Now, you know, that's the same as the housing crisis. If you're not building the capacity, you're always going to have issues. And, you know, this is why it links as much to old people as it links to young people. We don't build enough facilities, we don't build enough houses, we don't invest enough in our railway, we don't invest enough in our energy infrastructure. If you don't do these things, you're going to get a bottleneck at some point where the quality of the social care is poor because the resources that you have to work with is poor. And I think that that is perhaps the main thing that I would say to both Labour and the Tories. Actually, are you serious about things like planning laws? Are you actually serious about investing in infrastructure and streamlining that? Rather than just abstractly saying social care, the NHS, I would say that. Planning. You solve that, you solve an awful lot of issues that are affecting many other areas of society. That would be the question that I would want answered.
Emma, your thoughts?
I can't disagree with any of that. I think that's absolutely right. We do have a real problem with short-termism in this country, and we tend to think to the next election, and 5-year terms are not long enough to do really big change and set in motion the kind of really big change that we would need to see in things like social care. We have known for quite a long time, and I think it was a failing towards the end of the last Labour government, they didn't take this seriously enough, that we had an ageing demographic and that was going to hit. That has now very much hit, and nothing has happened. I remember discussions in 2014. I think Andy Burnham was Shadow Health Secretary then, him calling for a cross-party consensus on what needed to happen, because there would have needed to be areas where it would cost money. We would be looking at people having to invest some of the income they would take out of their home to do that. The Deal Not Commission said that 10 years ago. That was squashed by David Cameron to be cross-party on this. Then there was the Theresa May 2017. Labour completely attacked her on that, on the dementia tax, same thing. So both parties have played the politics of this and not played the long-term game. And I absolutely agree on planning in particular. I mean, we massively need to build more housing and the infrastructure that goes along with that. And some of that infrastructure has to be a social care service.
And again, that's a cross-party issue, because when you get down to local levels, it's local councillors of of both parties that like to object to planning decisions.
Well, all three when it comes to local government. The Lib Dems talk a great game nationally, but terrible locally.
A few days ago, it feels a few days ago, it might have been a week or so now, Keir Starmer, when he was doing his speech, he was referencing what he was calling sticking plaster politics. So he was saying about the short-termism, you know, how wrong it was, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, in this country, it doesn't really care who you are. It is all about how do I keep my job? How do I get myself, my party re-elected in the next 5-year cycle? And I've often pondered and been, you know, shouted down whenever I've pondered it. Would it ever work taking out the big strategic issues in this country, so whether it's your NHS strategy, your social care strategy, whatever, anything that's like really long, where you need like a long-term strategy, your energy security policy, whatever, taking that out, creating a cross-party working group, and then you do all your strategic stuff in consensus, and I'm almost laughing because I don't think they'd reach consensus, but whatever. Then all your strategic stuff is over there and it's outside the realm and remit of your 5-year political cycle. You can have your cycles to do all the day-to-day stuff.
Sadly, they did that with Dilnot, though, and that's exactly what they did. They took it out of the politics. They said set up a commission to do this 10-year plan. Dilnot and Marmot, and both of these have been in a drawer forever. If they'd ever been acted on, we wouldn't be in this situation.
It's a slippery slope also towards things ultimately becoming undemocratic. If you're taking it out of the hands of political parties and you're giving it over to people who are essentially glorified civil servants, well, actually, who oversees then? Actually, who decides on who those people are? And then when they fail to come to a consensus, who gets the blame? Who actually do they answer to?
Put it out to referendum.
More referenda. That's what there's Switzerland for the masses. I'm not opposed to more referenda.
I'm just trying to be think outside of the box, because what I think right now in this country, politics doesn't work. It hasn't worked for a long time. You know, we can't even get shot of the two main parties. You know, it's either going to be Labour or it's going to be Tory, and it's just so much of the same old, same old. And I would like to see real radical reform in this country, not least to actually get people turning out and voting, because so many people, myself included, by the way, haven't always taken the opportunity to go out and vote because they're so disengaged because of the state that it's all in. Does anyone at home think I'm talking sense or not? If you do, get in touch, make me feel good, because so far no one seems to agree with my ideas about taking things out and putting them into some kind of... I think your point is a very good one. Who would oversee that?
There's got to be democratic oversight, otherwise you've just got...
Or the king, why not? Let's find a use for King Charles and let's give him control of the oversight.
I certainly agree he doesn't currently have one. But...
Well, I don't know. Let's have a look at what some of you guys have to say, shall we? Mark says, why do people always blame the government or the PM rather than the shambles of civil servants and other highly paid managers who aren't doing their jobs that they're paid for? Everything relates to people and choices. If you're not happy, says Mark, move. There's a lot of Marks emailing me in today. What do you think to this? Christine says, in capitals, I always know you mean business when you put it in capitals. Christine says, you cannot fix the NHS without fixing social care.
She's right. She's completely right.
But who do you think, Christine, is the person for the job? Who do you actually think could sort it out? I don't know if anyone can, quite frankly. Elise says, let's face it, all baby boomers are now old and need care, which we cannot afford and not take care due to not enough young people. Don't forget, by the way, that social care isn't just for the elderly. A lot of working-age people need social care as well. Keep all your thoughts coming. Oh, yes, I found one. Angie, you just come in, you just caught my eye. Angie says, I totally agree with you, Michelle, on your cross-party view on big strategic issues. Good, but then to answer Benedict's point, who would oversee that? I don't know. You tell me. GBviews at gbnews.uk. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to get into the minimum age for criminal responsibility. What should it be? England, Wales, Northern Ireland is 10. Scotland is 12. That is much lower, by the way, than many, many, many other countries. It's been a debate that's rumbled on for years about whether or not that age should be lifted. Should it? You tell me. I'll see you in 2.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as Spare finally hits shelves, Dan gives his unflinching verdict on Prince Harry's tome of hate. The nation's top royal experts and insiders will weigh in too, including Angela Levin, biographer of the Queen Consort, and former Diana butler Paul Burrell, who'll defend himself against scathing allegations by the Duke. Plus, Fleet Street icon Kelvin MacKenzie offers a defence of the British press, And Megyn Kelly asks if even America has had enough of the Sussexes. Join Dan 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewbs. You guys are quite divided tonight, so you are. In terms of the anti-strike laws, we was discussing that first. I would say it's almost like a 50-50 split between you guys. I want your ideas, by the way, on Social Care about who do you think is the person, or what is the party, or what is the process, I don't know, to fix Social Care. I want your solutions on that. I'm asking you, though, right now, about criminal age of responsibility, the minimum age. I want your thoughts on that. If you just tuned in, you're wondering what's going on and who we all are. I'm Michelle Dewbs. This is Dewbs & Co. We're with you till 7. And alongside me, the political consultant, Emma Burnell, and the political commentator, Benedict Spence. Phil says, Michelle, you know right from wrong at a very early age. Most kids are pretty switched on by the age of 10. It's one thing being pretty switched on, Philip, but are you aware criminally of what is illegal, what is a crime, what is not? This is kind of what I'm pondering tonight. Richard says reducing it to 10 would massively help cure the problem of antisocial behaviour and would help the police too. It is 10 in England, Wales. Sorry?
And it hasn't.
No, that's Emma Burnell, by the way, Philip. Richard, sorry. She's chipping in there saying it hasn't helped matters. Many of you are saying 12, so that is what I'm pondering right now. Just heard, by the way, that story in the States of a 6-year-old. I mean, I'm not comparing us to the States, but goodness me, what kind of world do we live in? So the minimum age of criminal responsibility, MACA it's sometimes called, it is 10 in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, but it's out for public consultation at the moment in Northern Ireland about potentially raising it. The age in Scotland is 12. There's always conversations, Emma Burnell, about where is the right level. I always sit there and I think of James Bulger. I will never forget it until the day I die.
No, you can't not, can you? It's, of course, the first case that springs to mind, particularly of anyone of our generation. We remember that so clearly and so viscerally, I think. Look, it's really hard. I would not set the criminal age of responsibility at 10 because I think there is a difference between knowing the basic right and wrong that a 10-year-old understands and understanding consequences. And we have a lot of discussions about the kinds of decisions that we should and should not be allowing teenagers to make, usually around their own bodies. So should you be drinking? Should you be smoking? Should you be having sex? Should you be allowed to make life-changing alterations to your body under the age of 16, under the age of 18? We have those discussions because we know that age 10, somebody's understanding of the future and the consequences are not fully formed. And so we do, as a society, have to understand what we do with people who behave abhorrently but are not yet fully formed, grown-up human beings able to understand the consequences of that behaviour. We, of course, have to take children who, I mean, the reason that we remember the Jamie Folger crime is because it was so extreme and so outside of the norm that it's not statistically significant, as it were, in terms of the levels of criminality. But those children have to be
as criminals.
They committed a criminal act.
But do you
we have to take those children out of society. How that then happens, whether they should have gone through a grown-up trial is different from should they be removed from society, which they absolutely had to be.
They're not children anymore, they were 10, quite right to say. Those two people that snatched, tortured, and ultimately essentially murdered a 2-year-old, do you think that they were criminals?
I think they were not... They shouldn't have been tried as criminals. I think they should probably have been in Broadmoor or whatever the child equivalent of Broadmoor is for the rest of their lives, because they were clearly in such a state of mental negligence that they were unable to... I mean, they were immoral. They were amoral, even, without morals.
Disgusting.
Absolutely disgusting.
You can't compare them to a 30-year-old who knows full well the consequences of their actions and keeps on behaving. I don't think you can compare a 10-year-old and a 30-year-old because they just aren't the same person. My fear around raising the age is that what we will do is end up sort of brushing off behaviour that happens before 12 as, oh, that's just childish, this, that, and the other, that's just hijinks, that doesn't matter. And I think it's very interesting that this has happened in Scotland, seeing as there's a major push in Scotland to also reduce the voting age down to 16. And you kind of sat there going, so, you know, where does the responsibility happen? The younger they are, they're more responsible to make big life-changing decisions and also criminal behaviour. What happens there? I think... putting sort of a firm label on something around age 10 or 12, this is a criminal, this isn't necessarily the most helpful thing. But I do think that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have very firm intervention and the potential to take children out of society.
Absolutely.
There will always be the occasional examples of children who can never be part of society, as I think is the case of James Bulger. But thank God, that isn't a regular occurrence.
Absolutely.
It's actually quite unusual. There should be measures in place for people like that to be removed, but that doesn't mean that, you know, children who, you know, get into fights and accidentally, you know, maim somebody or something like that because they're being children, that doesn't mean that they're the same as a psychopath. You know, it doesn't mean that they're the same as a 30-year-old who has known for most of their life that this is wrong and continues to behave in a violent way. I think there needs to be some understanding that, yes, they understand right and wrong, but as Emma says, they don't have a consequence of any idea of consequences. They don't have a concept of time in the same way that an adult does either. You know, you can say, you're going to go to prison for the rest of your life. You've barely been alive for 5 minutes. You don't know what that means. It's entirely different.
See, I think too many people are too soft. I do, on kids. I've got...
I agree with that. I think a lot of people are soft, but I don't think that, you know, saying that somebody is a criminal at 12 rather than 10 makes the blindest bit of difference there. What we still need is intervention.
It matters to the outcome.
Well, does it matter to the outcome if you're saying to a child...
If you're going to lock them up permanently anyway...
Yeah.
Well, we don't lock anyone up permanently.
Well, I mean, that's a whole different matter. That, but if what we're talking about is if you commit that kind of atrocious crime that is once in a generation, you are removed permanently from society, and we all agree on that on this panel, I think. But that's not the same.
Those two people weren't removed permanently
but that's what we're saying. They should have been. But there's a difference between that removal being psychiatric and that removal being criminal. And that if you make a blanket law for all 12-year-olds based on that case that was once in a generation, that's a different, that has different consequences and different outcomes.
Also, they were released as adults. So again, that's a different conversation about whether or not you can be, as it were, cured of what it was that afflicted them, which I think most people would say, no, you can't be. So that's a different conversation, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, this whole James Bulger thing, it is, I think it's an age thing, because those two people, I don't even like, to me, they're animals, those two people that did that to that little boy. They were released, they were given a whole anonymity, courtesy of the taxpayer. One of them proved himself to be a monumental wrong-un, in and out of the justice system again. And I just think so many people look upon it and say, oh, but they're children, they're children, they're children. And it just doesn't wash with me. Sue, as messaging says, Michelle, I am a worker in child protection, and I can say that children are only able to understand their responsibility regarding criminal actions dependent on their parenting. Many children are never taught right from wrong. Sue, I bow to you as the professional, but I've got to be honest, it don't really wash with me. Because surely, you know, you can be the worst parented child in the land. You must know if you attack somebody, if you steal, if you whatever. Surely you must know that that's wrong. Am I deluded? I don't know. I mean, I bow to the professionals, of course. Amy says 10 is probably a reasonable age to be held criminally responsible, but the court should and probably do consider their age very carefully when thinking about mitigating circumstances and any sentencing. The two Bulger killers, by the way, they actually took a case to the European Court of Human Rights, if that's the right label for it, and they got a payout because actually it was ruled that they didn't get a fair trial because they went through the adult court system. And
well, I mean, again, that would be a change in... If they hadn't gone through the criminal system, they wouldn't have been able to bring that case.
Yeah, but I think... honestly, I've got to be careful because I get so emotional about this.
This is the problem, though. We have to take out, when making law, you can't make law based on the Bulger case, much as we wish to emote about it.
It's a thing, isn't it?
I feel
Whenever a
every
child's
bit as sick as you do,
public
Michelle.
Support for capital punishment goes through the roof.
Yes.
The whole idea is that, you know, we're supposed to make laws not based on, you know, in the heat of the moment, because bad laws are made, which is the same, actually, when it comes to things like striking and things like that. If you make the laws whilst the strikes are going on, you're likely to make the wrong kind of laws because it's a different set of circumstances to when you're looking at it in the cold, hard light of day.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I do concede that that particular case makes me enormously emotional, more so now than ever, because I've got a little boy the same age of James Bulger. So it's just such an awful case. Bernard says 7-year-olds these days can talk to you like an adult. A 7-year-old today is equivalent to a 12-year-old 50 years ago. I'm not sure that's a scientific.
We should not be speaking to 7-year-olds like adults, and they should not be having access to that kind of adult conversation.
I'm of the complete opposite. I think people extend their childhoods and adolescence far into their 20s now. I don't think people do grow up that far.
There's ways and ways, aren't there? I think there's a real problem with children having access to far too much adult content, but there's also an infantilisation of all of us. I mean, you know, well into our 20s, 30s, 40s, even in my case.
Well, indeed.
Where we don't live the more grown-up life that we once expected to.
Yeah, and just so you're aware, in France, for example, is 13, Italy 14, Spain 14, Australia 10, Northern Ireland, I said, of course, is 10, but they are putting it out to consultation as we speak. Very emotive subject, isn't it? I have to be honest. Anyway, keep your thoughts coming in. And look at this, time flies, doesn't it, when you're getting stuck into interesting topics. I wonder, before I leave you tonight, how much do you think you need in order to live a comfortable life wherever you live? How much money? You tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company until 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, the political consultant Emma Burnell and the political commentator Benedict Spence. Welcome back, everybody. Oh, that age of criminal responsibility, that has got you talking the minimum age. Now, this is not a scientific poll, I grant you that, but I get the sense from looking at your comments that actually the majority, certainly people that are contacting me, are absolutely fine with the age of 10 as it stands. It'll be interesting to see then, won't it, the outcome of the public consultation that they're having in Northern Ireland. Gavin, I think you make an interesting point. I'm not sure if I agree with it, but interesting nonetheless. You say, in your mind, up until the age of 18, the actions of a child should be entirely the responsibility of the parent, criminal or otherwise. Really? So I don't know. So say like if your 17-and-a-half-year-old child that you've tried your best with goes out and, I don't know, heaven forbid, murder someone, what, you think that the parent should go and serve 25 years in prison? Not sure I agree, but each to their own. Let me know your thoughts. Martin says a similar theme. If parents disciplined their children properly, then ultimately we wouldn't be having this discussion at all. I'm possibly wrong, but I thought one of those Bulger killers, as an example, I thought one of them did come from a reasonable background. I'm testing my memory now, but I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong. Right, Esther, and I think you're talking about the social care topic here, Esther. You're saying instead of expecting the government to look after our parents and pay for it, perhaps it's high time we took responsibility and looked after ourselves. Lots of you on this social care thing again. You can't fix the NHS until you fix social care. Completely agree. John says the age of criminality has worked fine for so many years, sir. If it is not broken, do not fix it. You say it's worked well for many years, but actually this debate has rumbled on for many, many years, and it divides so many opinions. And of course, it differs as well, doesn't it, the world over in terms of that minimum age. Now, are you comfortable in terms of your life, in terms of your income? Do you think you have a nice life or not? Apparently, according to a survey, many people are saying that they need a salary of £49,300 a year to live comfortably. In London, that rose to £65,000. I found that quite fascinating. Emma Burnell, I mean, we can all debate and dispute what actually we mean by comfortable, but in essence, you know, let's just be sensible. I'm not talking about five-star luxurious holidays. I'm talking about the bills, a nice place to live or a reasonable place to live and a little bit spare at the end of the month. What do you think?
I think it's really complex. I mean, it does sort of depend on what you mean by comfortable. Are we talking about 5 holidays a year, 2 cars, and
no,
or
that's
are we
luxury, isn't it? That's
but what always interests me in these debates is actually quite often the more comfortable you are, the less you sometimes feel it. And actually, the less you actually have to pay out. So I'm lucky enough to own my home with a mortgage. My mortgage is so much lower than the other people in my building with almost very, very similar flats who have to pay rent. And they pay almost double what I pay for the exact same property. So if me and the person living in that flat were doing exactly the same job, I would be comfortable, they would be deeply uncomfortable, because their percentage of their earnings would be so much higher on paying for the exact same flat and their living costs.
True.
So I think we have to take it out simply from going, if you earn this, you are comfortable. If you don't earn this, you're comfortable. And think about actually what's going out as well as what's coming in.
I always found fascinating as well the figure that people define as meaning wealthy, because to your point as well, wealthy depends on kind of your outgoings ultimately, doesn't it? Let's be clear. Your level of comfort does depend on what you've got to spend out, but I found that quite an interesting one. But anyway, average salaries, apparently workers said they'd live comfortably on Benedict. In the east of England was 44 grand. London, as I said, 65. Yorkshire, I found this quite interesting. My neck of the woods, 45 grand. See, I actually found that quite a lot.
Harrogate's quite expensive.
Yeah, Harrogate. I'm not on about Harrogate. If I'm thinking like Hull.
York is also quite expensive. I understand,
Yeah, true.
places like Hull, but actually Yorkshire is not one homogenous zone. It's got some very, very nice places and some very deprived areas, which I think kind of meets in the middle of about 45,000. I don't think that's actually too unfair. This is levelling up, I suppose.
Wales,
It's at the north of England, it's a lot more.
47,000.
47,000.
Yeah, that's Wales.
10B again. Very, very nice part of the world, very expensive housing.
What do you think, Scotland?
I imagine there's a massive disconnect between Glasgow and Edinburgh and the Highlands. I reckon about
Getting
35,000.
too deep into the
35,000, let's say Scotland.
48,000, apparently, is the sum that people think.
Edinburgh is crazy. That's
the heating
Edinburgh.
bills, isn't it, with Scotland?
But do you think we've almost reached a point in society where it's almost unreasonable for this moment in time, anyway, this cost of living crisis, to want to be comfortable? Do we just have to fasten our belts, cut our cloth and just, you know, ride these choppy waves?
Part of me does often think that, actually, and that's that this country, broadly speaking, has lived beyond its means for a very long time, and that we don't quite understand that most people in the world, most countries in the world, do not actually live anywhere near the quality of living that we have now. That's not to say that we should all regress or that we should be happy with regression, but you should be prepared that things will not always be quite so rosy. Now, the other thing to take into account is that you might say that 44,000 is, you know, what you'd live on comfortably, but the second you get to 44,000, instantly your aspirations go up and you think 60,000 is what it is.
True.
And I think very recently, actually, it was significantly less, certainly in London, what people felt was comfortable. I think it was around 40, and now it's 60, and that's, I think, a sign of quite how quickly things have moved. And in London, I think it does sort of skew things, because really you need to be pretty well off to have a comfortable existence in London, whereas the rest of the country, that's not quite the case.
Yeah, Mark says one of the problems here, Michelle, is that people are just not willing to live within their means anymore. Many people, by the way, blame things like social media for all of this, because everyone on social media seems to have everything. And then people get jealous, don't they? But by the way, half the time, a lot of these people on social media, they don't really have this stuff. They probably bought it from a shop, kept the labels on, took the pictures, and then sent the thing back to the shop, if you ask me. Lots of you, still, the thing that you guys are talking about today is this age of criminal responsibility. There seems to be a lot of support for that whole notion that if a child commits a criminal act, it is the parent that should be held responsible for that. I don't know where I stand on that. Mark, you say exactly the same thing, that you do agree that prosecute the parents for their kids' crimes. Some people, you know, they are good parents, but their child is just a bit of a wrong 'un and rebels. Should the parent then get the criminal record for the kids' misdemeanours?
Can I just jump in very quickly? I think actually that there is a link through a lot of these stories, and it goes back to what I said at the start, which is around the breakdown of trust. And I think you can also link that to social care, and what one of your viewers said, which I thought was very interesting, which was that people need to take more responsibility for themselves. Of course, in other societies, it's often, you know, the older members of the family are looked after within the family. And I think that there is a sense that there has been a breakdown in communities around much of the country. You know, people have to move away from where they grew up to find work. London is a very good example of that. And I think that, again, happens with people saying, where are the parents? Where's the responsibility? There is, I think, a sense of yearning, of loss, of a sense of family identity, community identity as well, that we have lost, and perhaps people want to get back and feel that things would get better if we had that back.
Well, there you go. And in a lot of countries, I remember staying with a family in Vietnam, I think it was, and there was so many different generations cramped in one tiny little house. I've got to say, I have been unscientifically outverted tonight because I'm just getting so many emails thick and fast saying if your child is a criminal, then you, as the parent, should be prosecuted. Goodness me, that's a lesson to us all to be good parents then, isn't it? That is all I've got time for. Thank you very much, both of you, for the conversation. Over to you, Mr. Farage. What have you got for us?
Michelle, thank you. We'll be going live to a small village in Northamptonshire where a 17th century manor is about to be filled up with 400 young males who've recently crossed the English Channel. It will double the population of the village. We'll be asking, at what point are we going to say enough? I'll be asking David Davis that very question. But all of that comes after the all-important weather.
Sundays on GB News from 9:30, it's Camilla Tominey.
For a politics show with personality.
Then at 11, Michael Portillo.
For topical discussion, debate, some ethical dilemmas, and sometimes even a sense of the ridiculous.
And at 1 p.m, me, Alistair Stewart. Every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping